Thank you for being here. In the, in the, in the past weekend, I was in New York to attend several functions. And Guyanese there, I must say, are entirely positive and hopeful for a change in Guyana. They have observed many from afar and many who have visited in the past few years, and they have expressed serious concerns about the deterioration that's taking place in our country now. They share our sentiments here, those of us who live here, that we're drifting, that there is no plan for the future, and that should this government remain in office, we will see another cycle of underdevelopment that characterized their period in office in an earlier era. And not would it only be a period of underdevelopment, but many of the features, the undemocratic features that were quintessentially govern that period, given the character of the PNC, that those would also return. That is, lack of democracy, the undermining of the other branches of government by the executive, the undermining of the judiciary, the arrogance in public office, that they have already seen signs of this happening. And so they were very concerned about developments here, and they all urged the PPP to do all it can to ensure that Guyana develops for all of our people. So I'm extremely grateful to those people who have expressed those sentiments of support, and also who have committed to help our country move forward. Their biggest concern mirrors that, however, of our people here in Guyana. They share our assessment that once the elections are free and fair, the PPP will sweep the polls. And they're very happy with our policies that we've laid out for the next 5 years that will ensure that Guyana returns to development rapidly. It returns to the creation of jobs and housing and better health care, etc. And they know because of that that we have the track record to implement such a program. So they know that once the elections are free and fair, with our plans for the future and given what's happening on the ground and the neglect of this government, that the PPP will win those elections. But the biggest concern is, would the elections be free and fair? And so I'm confronted with this question everywhere. And I want to say to those people and those who are here in Guyana too, that it's not unreasonable, as I said before, to think that the PNC will attempt, this APNU cabal will attempt to tamper with the elections. But the opportunities to do so are limited in the new environment. So all along their plans have been stymied because of a vigilant public, a free press, and our struggles, the struggles of the PPP, to expose attempts to prepare for such an eventuality. And it started from the appointment, the legal appointment of the chairman of GCOM, Mr. Patterson, Justice Patterson, who was ruled unconstitutional by the CCJ. The appointment was ruled unconstitutional by the CCJ, and he was removed. So an attempt to do so, to tamper with the elections, because with him they're highly unlikely we would have had free and fair elections. But that attempt was thwarted. Secondly, the attempt to do a house-to-house activity that is to replace the NRR. That shouldn't have been done. It was started even after the chairman of GCOM, Mr. Patterson, was removed on the basis of an order that he signed. And again, we had to go to the court, and the court stopped that activity, declared that it was unconstitutional to remove the names of people from the NRR simply because you didn't find them. That Guyanese citizens, basically, once you're registered, you can only be removed or lose your right to vote based on reasons outlined in the Constitution, not capricious behavior by GCOM. And so that house-to-house activity was designed to, again, tamper, we believe, with the voters list by dropping names and creating confusion. So we succeeded in getting that activity stopped too, because it was subsequently stopped by GCOM, by the commission, given that the purpose for which it was started was declared unconstitutional. So again, that attempt, they made an attempt and it was fought off. Thirdly, we saw another attempt by GCOM using their commissioners to remove people's name from the voters list simply because they did not collect their ID cards. The two were not related. In fact, it's illegal to do so. And that would not have only had immediate consequences, maybe less so immediately, but could have had long-term consequences. If you win the elections, then it would have been the basis for an elections petition. And that was, again, fought off. And then this whole issue, the fourth issue was the voters list. So we went through the statutory process to clean up the voters list, which was the extraction of the PLE from the NRR, that list being subjected to claims and objections. But APNU and the others were insisting, and their commissioners were insisting on this whole-scale merger of the 300,000 names, 300,000 names that came out of the house-to-house activity with the NRR. And finally, that was changed, so fought off, and it was changed to new registrants alone, that the PPP will accept verified new registrants to go on the list. They even attempted through that they said the only means of verification, you would recall Vincent Alexander arguing that the only means of verification will be the cross-matching of fingerprints. We argued that that will not identify padding or duplication because of inputting errors. And we were proven correct on that. We were proven correct on that when the cross-matching of the fingerprints were done abroad. They showed that 37,000 new registrants would be available. We had 37,000 new registrants in category A, that is 18 and above. When they did the internal cross-referencing again, that figure came down to 20,000. So the cross-matching of the fingerprint was not the gold standard, although that is what APNU wanted. Then APNU wanted the entire 20,000 to go into the database unverified. And GCOM, then they amended their position to say, we'll do a sample. We'll do a sample testing of the list. we argued that the sample will not pick up many of the padding if that takes place, etc. And why do a sample in any case when you can complete all the verification in a short period? They argued against that. They argued against that. So when they put out the 20,000 odd new registrants, you would recall over the last week that there were thousands of people who had already been registered, who had voted in the past, some very prominent individuals in Guyana who were on the list of new registrants. And just justifying what we've been saying all along. And so that figure came back to them, and now the number now moved from 20 to 16,000 new registrants. That's what they're claiming. And GCOM has just decided to verify all of those names, which could be done in 4 or 5 days, and they've started that today. That decision was made on Tuesday. Yesterday, the parties met with Low and Field, and they supplied the scrutineers, and our activity will be completed in 4 or 5 years. They could have done that 2-3 weeks ago, and it would have been completed. But they were just fighting this off. The APNU commissioners were fighting this off. And so let me just tell you how nonsensical these comments are. So random sampling aimed at tracking duplicates on NRR Alexander. That's a Chronicle story. Then Vincent Alexander on the same day said, GCOM to verify new house-to-house registrants. And this is what he said. Revisiting people does not determine duplicates or otherwise. What is required are 2 acts. This is on the 17th of December. One act is the act of cross-matching from the fingerprints. There are some difficulties with those. Now he says there are difficulties. There was not difficulty, there was a massive, massive error, which we are pointing out. The cross-matching came back and said 37,000 new registrants, and now we're down to 16,000 after the internal checks at GCOM. So clearly that was wrong, which is what they were only wanted to pursue. The other thing that is required for GCOM to do, side-by-side comparisons between the existing National Register of Registrants, the house-to-house registration, and claims and objections to see if across those there are names which are duplicates and that have not been identified by the biometric matching. So which is what they did, and they came down to the 16,000. But that will never pick up if they are duplicate names. That will never pick up that of those not still on the list, whether they do exist, these people. It's not verification. So this gives you an example. They're opposed to verification but want sampling done when verification is the gold standard. So this again was fought off. That was the 4th attempt to try to tamper with the list or the elections process. And this too was fought off. And they have been resisting external oversight, and thankfully we've succeeded in ensuring that there will be external oversight at GCOM. There will be external oversight there. So that is within the machinery. So I want to urge all of those people who have fears to say that APNU will continue to try to tamper with the process, given their history. But every attempt will be carefully examined, and they're not succeeding. It's a different environment. We have a free press, and we have at least people within there who have some integrity, and there shall be oversight. So the next things that we want to look at, as I said before, would be polling day activities, the training of staff, the transparency surrounding information, voters' education, the placement of staff, etc. We want it professionally done. And we will be pressing this case and strong external observers for polling the activities themselves. So I just want to assure people that it is this thwarting, every attempt they made has been fought off by the people of Ghana led by, and the People's Progressive Party. So they're getting increasingly desperate, and you see this desperation in their language. Because imagine they issued something from Congress Place and said, the PPP are master riggers at elections. Imagine PNC calling the PPP that has a history of documented rigging of elections for such a long period by the international community. Check the Caribbean Council of Churches report, Lord Aylesbury report, the BBC documentary, the CIA website, the source documents that are coming out from the secret services of the developed countries. Everyone knows that they have a history of rigging elections. Even in the last few elections that we've had, we saw the voting pattern in some areas where the average vote, they almost have 100% turnout in some boxes where the PPP was not represented. Even that, tampering with elections now. This is a sign of desperation because they're not getting their way on the rigging of elections. So I hope that people will look at all of these factors and see the desperation in happening. We have to continue to work towards free and fair elections. It's not a one-off activity. The PPP has had thousands of people who volunteer their time, and we're extremely grateful to them who've been checking the list, the several lists so far. They've been checking the list of new registrants. They're out there now scrutinizing the list along with GCOM officials. They're doing a good job now in ensuring democracy for our country. And I'm extremely grateful for all of those who have been doing this. The second issue that I would like to talk about today is the issue of oil and gas. And so we saw some major developments over the course since I last held my press conference. At the last press conference, I spoke extensively about the PR offensive that Jordan and the others had embarked upon to create the impression that they were in charge and lead of the oil and gas sector, that they had created the appropriate framework for adequate management of the sector, that they had created the safeguards against corruption, and that they are looking out for Guyana. So statements emanating from the Department of Energy and from Jordan about where our money is kept, which bank the money is kept, and speaking extensively about features of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So I said, in spite of all of this charm offensive for Guyanese and misleading them, I took apart what they said, that there's nothing unique about keeping our money in the Riggs Bank in New York, or reserves were kept there. Secondly, given their track record, the transparency issues that Jordan spoke about, you couldn't even, that there is no guarantee the money is not stolen, given their track record, and they're not strong enough provisions in the legislation. And thirdly, I spoke of the partisan nature, in fact, government control of the sovereign wealth fund, which is a bad practice. It should be arm's length from the politician. But I said all of this was a smoke screen to really hide what they were doing, because I heard from the grapevine, and that was Thursday last week, that they were busy through direct contact to selective people trying to get a company corruptly to sell the oil and to lock us into a long-term engagement for that. And so that was Thursday last week. By weekend, I saw a number of things. Bloomberg came out with their report, and then a lot of the local newspapers got involved in online media houses got involved in the expose of this issue. Because had that not happened, had that Bloomberg story not come out, then I don't think we would have formally known. We would have suspected that this was happening, but in the absence of any verification of it. And so what followed was disastrous. What followed just betrayed the deep-seated approach of this government, or proclivity of this government to operate in the dark for corrupt purposes. And so when the matter was aired, we got an explanation from the Department of Energy. And then there were press conferences, etc. And those themselves raised a whole ton of issues, the explanations. So what is wrong with a public tender being issued and all of Guyana knowing about the public tender? What is wrong with that process? So that was not done. So this is what the Starbuck News article of December 17 says: Bino defends silence on first oil sales. He says here, they quote him as saying, the decision was made after multiple rounds of consultations internally. So we know who the internal consultants would be: Harman, Trotman, and the others. The same one, the internal, probably Kevin Granger and a few others. That is, we believe you can't decide who to invite to a bidding process on the basis of internal consultation. So they need to tell us who the people internally they consulted. But I suspect that the whole country knows that it's this incestuous circle that has been fingered in all sorts of corruption in the sector. He says that they're supposed to meet with in the same article, with the prospective buyers side by side. Now, already Bloomberg said that's unusual. If you have a bidding process, why do you need to meet with the individuals, the bidders, face to face? We believe that that could only be, first of all, you limit who would tender in a secret process, and then secondly, you want to meet them face to face. And it leaves room for an enormous amount of corruption. Then in the explanation why they needed to meet face to face, they said, we don't know the real fair market value of our crude. What we are trying to do is test it, run it through a refining system take the feedback from the refiner, from the people who are not just refining, but also the marketing channels. Now, they said we will receive our first shipment in March. That is the government share. So 2 months prior to that, Exxon will be shipping and selling its crude. So we need now, as though Exxon will not have the testing done and everything else to set the standards of the oil. Once Exxon does that, we don't need to set their own standards about the quality of the crude, etc. Exxon will sell its crude and determine the market will know long before we sell our share of the oil, the quality of our crude, etc. And Exxon will have to do that. And they're a huge company. They don't need to do this. This is just an excuse. And they're saying that this will lead, the 3 shipments they're selling would lead to a contract for marketing of on a longer term basis of our crude. And they intend to go to bid in January. So let me make it clear. This guy obviously by now doesn't understand that there are elections that are pending. That elections have been called, and therefore he has to act in a particular manner. Secondly, that particularly more so, this government is a caretaker illegal government. That's a sad limitation of its powers. And so he operates as though nothing is there. He wants to imagine the first shipment of oil from Guyana, or our share of the oil will be after March, but he wants to tie in all the arrangements now. Even the long-term contract he wants to go out for bidding for. So this smacks of corruption. It smacks of corruption. Let me make it clear that we argued that if our first share of oil comes in March, then why not allow Exxon to sell the first shipment? Because they have to sell it. They're a publicly traded company. They can't tamper with the price. We can verify the price that they receive for their crude. Allow them to sell the first shipment and then put in a proper system through open public tender for the sale of our oil. And we have to determine whether we will tender for 3 months period or we'll lock into a long-term contract. So every 3 months you go to tender or you lock in for a long term. But that should await a new government. Now let me make it clear that any company that ties up an arrangement now, we've made a decision that when we go to open public tender for the sale of our crude, that's the only way you can go, open public tender. Anyone can bid, not selective companies. That the company that ties up the arrangement with them now shall be excluded from any official when the open public tender is done. That is our position now, because they're knowingly entering into a contract with a government that has its powers reduced and that is known for its venality. That shouldn't be tying up any such arrangements before the elections. And so I hope that that is quite clear, that we will go to open public tender for the sale of our crude, and it shall, that the company that ties up any arrangement with them shall be excluded, that one company, from bidding at the time. I don't want to go on for all the other things. Mr. Bino then goes on to say that oil companies would face no penalties for overstatement of costs. This is one of the most ridiculous things. They have to face a penalty. If I am not going to face a penalty, and I know, then what? They have an incentive to inflate their costs. They have an incentive to inflate their costs, and we, the Guyanese, will be paying all their costs. So assuming they're buying nuts and bolts or bananas in the market for $10, $100 a pound, and they put $200 a pound, and we have to pay for the bananas that they eat, or they inflate the cost of procurement. They say that we're buying a machine for $10 million, a piece of machinery, when it's $5 million US, and we end up paying for it. And there is no penalty for overstatement. That's falsification of the account. In any situation, there should be a penalty as a deterrent. He says they will be faced no penalty. I wonder if he works for us or for the company or the companies. It's an unbelievable statement from someone who heads the energy department. This means you're encouraging overstatement of cost. There is no penalty to it. The third issue, he says, local content policymakers resisting political pressure. So assuming that they are the local content policymakers, they shouldn't be making any policy again because we're in a period before elections. You shouldn't be making policy now. But they are resisting political pressure. But it's not political pressure. What they're resisting is pressure from Guyanese, not the PPP, for our local content policy that looks out for our country. It is from the guys who are now the private sector, who don't have a level playing field when they're bidding for or trying to supply goods and services. Guyanese private sector that can employ our people. It's the guy who is earning 72,000 Guyana dollars a month after working 12-hour shift for 28 days straight. He wants a policy there in place that says he must get the same pay as the foreigner who's making 10,000 dollars for the same period. The people of our country want the local content policy, but they're resisting political pressure. And he's talking, when you read the article, it looks like he's more concerned about the welfare of the oil companies than our people. That's the entire tenure of the article. Not political pressure from us, political pressure from our people. The kid in South Georgetown will never get a chance to get a job if they recruit only foreigners for every single thing. Or start a small business to supply some oil company something. This is, he doesn't look out for anybody. So the more they talk, then they expose how deeply they are compromised by the companies, how little they look out for our people, the people of Guyana. Every time they speak. And this is unbelievable. And how corrupt they are, how attached they are to secretive negotiations. He says, oh, we can't let people know about these discussions. We have to stage the release of the information because we are in negotiation. We're not talking about sharing the information at the negotiating table. We were just saying we wanted to know that you follow the right process, an open public tender. What is proprietary about an open public tender when that's the only course that you should be going? We didn't ask to see the content of the negotiation. All Guyana wanted to see, the people of Guyana, that you were going through an open public tender where anybody could bid, not just a selective few that you handpick internally based on experts' advice. So that is also utterly nonsensical. President Granger spoke with the police, and he says the people just want a police force that they can trust. So that was his biggest one-liner. And yes, it's true, the one-liner, but we've gone beyond the one-liners now and the campaign slogans. You've been president for 5 years. Now this is coming up to 5 years. And the people want to hear more about how you are going to solve the crime situation in Guyana and how you're going to get the police force that people can trust. You can't just declare it. This is what people want. Yeah, we agree. All of us want that. But how do you get there? So it starts off with the recognition that their crime is a problem. And so when asked by a reporter on an interview about the crime being a problem, he said, no, there is no problem. I give solutions. And his solution was in the same interview for solving the crime problem. So first of all, he didn't acknowledge that there is a crime problem. So that's the start. And secondly, he said his solution was the appointment of 4 deputy commissioners. 2 of the deputy commissioners have already been on the investigation. And remember, he said he had to select these people because they're not bribable. They were not bribable. And 2 of those are under internal and, I don't know, even though maybe external investigations already. So how can we even trust his judgment? We can't even trust his judgment. And so that was his only thing. We have not heard anything else about the policemen about, oh, this Christmas time, I'm going to return your 1-month bonus. I'm not going to hear when he was addressing them or to the joint services. I'm going to stay away from interfering with promotion in the police force by keeping Felix and Paul Slow far away from the day-to-day running of the police force. I'm going to return to professional management of the force. We didn't hear any of that sort of thing. Even his much vaunted decentralization, we didn't hear about. So we are getting these one-liners all the time, but with no solution, because they have no solution. Ramjatan has been a huge failure. Saying he's an abysmal failure is an understatement. The Ramjatan has been a total failure in the sector, and Granger, as the chief executive of the government, he doesn't even address the issue. Doesn't recognize the problem. And then, so as though that was not enough, he then goes to the veterans from our discipline services, and he says to them, our money will not go in the hands of the rich. And then we look at this track record. Bino just said, oh, we're not going to have a local content we're not going to be pressured into having a local content policy, when the local content policy is to protect us Guyanese. That is it. And to make it mandatory, not on the goodwill of the oil companies, but mandatory that a substantial part of their huge spending must be spent on Guyanese, on procuring our services, employing our people, etc. Mandatory, we have to make this, or else they will not do it. And so he just says that again. And then on the other hand, you see all of this giveaway. Trotman said one time, oh, he was told to sign the contract. Another time he said, oh, we only asked for $18 million because we don't have the capacity to spend more. I never heard such nonsense in my life. We don't have the capacity. I'd ask for all of the money, or $1 billion. Whether we have the capacity or not, we'll save the money till we have the capacity. We'll put it in a bank account in the name of the people of Guyana, not like the private bank account that they put it in. So that is the issue. They're one-liners. Minister Hastings urges GLSC to make Amerindian land titling, ancestral land issues top priority next year. So now she's concerned about Amerindian land titling. What about when she was sitting in Parliament, the Minister Hastings and Sidney Allicock and Keith Scott called Amerindians greedy and said that they should not get any oil money if they get more land. Is that still the position of the government, that Amerindians must be excluded from benefiting from the oil and gas sector if they ask for more and get more land? Is that still, because they haven't repudiated it as yet? That's in the Hansards. And the ancestral land issue is just beating a drum basically to mislead people. Because a few people, what about all the kids who need house lots? Afro-Guyanese kids who need house lots, etc. You're busy giving away the land to Trinidadian companies and everyone else and talking about ancestral lands now, when you haven't developed a single new house lot and you're giving away the land where we promised to do 50,000 house lots just on the East Coast and East Bank here, the prime lands. And you're not talking about ancestral land, so a Lincoln Lewis can now go and claim a whole village and move out all the people from well, you wouldn't be able to do that, but that's nonsense. So this is a priority. Why didn't you do it all along? Suddenly, election time, you want to polarize our people again by talking about these issues. This is what we get from the government. The other issue that I wanted to look at was this, what's happening in the government. They're paralyzed, I think, by fear now, fear of losing the elections. They're panicking. As I said before, their design at GCOM has been thwarted. And they know that the day of reckoning is coming with the voters, because the years of neglect and the arrogance and the broken promises, people have to now go back to the poll, and you can't steal their votes. So you have to work towards it. So the little gods in the government who totally ignored people who even work with them are panicked. And you see it reflected in several things. And we argued that as we get closer to the elections, we're going to see this happening. So the old rhetoric comes back. The rhetoric about, so they rolled out Carl Greenidge. I'm surprised that Carl Greenidge will be so partisan, given that he didn't even allow the minister to take the office as minister. He kept the office, and he's director general or foreign secretary. They created a position for him. But if you look at Carl Greenidge, there is something, I think this might be the Chronicle, and look at elections have consequences. We all know that. We all know that. But he speaks about, he does a Jordan on us, the same thing, and he comes out of the same mold of Winston Jordan. In the period when he was finance minister, it was disastrous for Ghana. By the time he left, based on his own words, 153% of revenue to service debt. The fiscal deficit was 25% of GDP, etc. The stock of debt was 900% of GDP. We were bankrupt. We were declared ineligible to borrow. We had to go to the IMF with a begging bowl. We managed to exit the IMF program by 2006 because of the work we did. The return, IMF is bankruptcy court. So this is the guy who took us into bankruptcy. But they have almost a fetish. I've argued about these people, that these economists, well, like Jordan and the others, and Greenwich, that they have a fetish for percentage changes. They think it's a great thing. So he says, look how great we are doing. Ghana is on the right path. The GDP grew. The credit to the private sector, transport and storage. A barren, sterile recitation of what happened, description of what took place in the economy. But they don't look at the impact of their policies. So they would happily say, we met our revenue target, and look, we are collecting $100 billion more than 2014. But that's $100 billion that you took from people's pocket and put in the treasury that you're claiming is a success will have economic consequences for the country and for our people. It has economic consequences for jobs, so people will lose jobs, etc. So they're not looking at the end indicators, how many people have lost their jobs, 30,000 jobs. They're not looking at almost every sector is in trouble, every sector of the economy. They're looking, oh, credit to the private sector grew by a certain percentage. When you look at what it is, it's very narrowly defined to which sector. So most of the sectors are in trouble. And had oil and gas not come on stream, then we would have been in the doldrums already. So this is the same old Carl Greenwich, Winston Jordan, a failed economic policy. Jordan argues we can't fund the school kids grant. It's too costly, 1.6 billion. But he'd easily spend 1.6 million on domestic travel for ministers. That is their priority. That is their priority. They don't look at the end that policy making is for a purpose. It is for improvement of people's lives. It's the numbers would not be the success in themselves. It is how are people better off? Are they making progress? Are they getting a piece of land? Is healthcare improving, etc.? That's how you judge it. So with this approach, that's why we failed miserably with him as finance minister and Jordan. The same approach, because they don't look at people. But then he says, he goes back in 2015, the PPP was removed from office because after 23 years, they had accumulated an unenviable record of scandal, dishonest practices, corruption, and human rights abuses. So this is the Carl Greenwich talking about scandals in government. Since this government took office, we've had about 80 different scandals. 80 different scandals every day, with the most dishonest government, corrupt government, openly corrupt government ever in our history. Openly corrupt. And I wonder if all of this dishonest practice and the stealing, why until now they can't charge people for the money that they stole. They haven't been able to charge a single person for having any money in their bank account that they shouldn't have had. And this is the same, in fact, Carl Greenwich never said a word when Nagamutu led the government into voting against our motion to make public all of our declarations to the Integrity Commission for the past 10 years. They voted against it, and then they dismantled the Secretariat of the Integrity Commission. For 3 years, this government, unlike every government from 2000 to 2014, did not have to submit their statements to the Integrity Commission. Did not have to do that. And so this is, they rolled out, it's a sign of desperation now when they start rolling out back the Carl Greenwiches to do the hatchet job and the lies that they're told to people in the 2014 period. They don't have anything else to say. And it's not confined here. They have an Earl Hamilton now who is a product of they have a lot of fake news going around now. So, so if you want to find out where Earl Hamilton and the others who said that we will reverse the salary increase to the public servants, which is a nonsense. I said public servants must collect their salaries, the increases, they deserve it. They should get their salary increases. By the way, I heard that there is a total confusion at GRA with the salary increases, creating unease among the staff there. I hope it's addressed. But this same Earl Hamilton then said that we will rename QC to Chedi Jagan School and Bishop Sighting to Janet Jagan School, circulating it widely. Now they've said, the Earl Hamilton has said that that they found a shipment of weapons, the old sort of thing that the police had to come out and say was a lie. So it's a troll. It's coming out of Congress Place. And the foreign advisors that they have, the people that they brought in from UK and other places, they do a lot of this sort of stuff, hacking people's email, creating fake news and stuff like that. Been a campaign in many parts of the world. So this is a sign of desperation too. They don't have a track record to run on. They'll run on a record of lies and fake news. And then the GNBA was the last one that got involved in this. So Mr. Leslie Sobers, who I gather was shared a firm with Joseph Harman, very close to the government, he says that the GNBA is considered temporary banning people for divisive elections rhetoric. We've been calling for this ages. He should just listen to Walter Lawrence, etc. And so we don't trust the GNBA headed by this person, this gentleman. So he should not be even working in partnership with GCOM. They've been openly partisan. So he said, I've been warning broadcasters to be wary of content. He wants to tell us whether we can call Granger a charlatan or not, Whether we can, and he wants to fine Freedom Radio for calling Granger a charlatan. Granger is a charlatan. And stuff like that. He wants us to be, he wants to warn us about our content. And then he says in the same article, I saw it reported, that if programs must be fair and equitable to all stakeholders. He just needs to tell the government media this. But having him there, I suspect that he wants to temporarily ban those stations that carry our news and the campaign messages. But this will be a violation of human rights, and we will take this up seriously, because we're not going to allow one partisan guy to do this. But this is the typical old PNC behavior. And so if Leslie Sobers thinks he's going to get away with that, then he has another thing coming. And then finally, I want to talk about the Essequibo Coast, the flooding there. A lot of people, from what I gather, almost 40%, the assessment of the cultivation areas have been flooded out. I heard that even in the Pomeroon they have flooding, and that although there have been the residential areas have seen some improvement because of the change in the weather, it's still, the situation is still dire in the Essequibo Coast. And so I know the regional chairman and the others have called for help from the central government, but nothing has been extended to the Essequibo people who live on the Essequibo Coast, who have suffered from extensive flooding. So I hope that something will be done to assist people there. But given the neglect of this government, it may be a misguided hope. And then I wanted to say that, to express our sympathies for all those who have lost their lives in these horrific accidents that seem to be plaguing our roads. And clearly, as I said before, there has to be some national, not a political, not a partisan approach to this matter to bring safety on our roads, because too many productive Guyanese lives are lost because of these accidents, etc. So we are willing at any point in time to be part of any team that will approach this matter in a way that it deserves, and from a national perspective, not a political or partisan perspective. Thank you. Thank you, then. Yes, you wanted a question?
You spoke about the company, if there's a company to form a deal with the person,
Yeah,
that
sure.
they will be barred. Is this just from that open tender process or entirely any future oil?
No, not from this process, from any open tender we have in the future, Public, and they would all be open public tender.
So, so you're saying from the oil, any oil deal we may have to do?
Yes, that is part of this arrangement, yes.
Okay, you spoke earlier about some feedback on the manifesto. Can you go in a little bit more? You have some excerpt earlier on your plans. So can you say what the feedback has been?
Oh, okay. So we're in the process of delivering the manifesto to many homes across the country, and that process is going well. We'll continue to do this all the way up to the elections. We want to cover every home, getting a copy of our plans for the future. We're working on fleshing out the technical version too, and so people will have a chance to listen to presentations, more in-depth presentations about each area and how we intend to approach, say, power supply in Guyana. And so they will see that we have a plan to what we will do in the first few days. We're not talking about 100 days, we're talking about the first week of the new government, decisions that have to be made because they have not been made in 5 years about the sector. And so we've had good feedback. We've had good feedback. We've had a lot of issues people want to clarify a lot about our plans. They want to know more about our regional plans. And so in the manifesto, we said we'll work on regional job creation and growth plans. And so we'll be outlining some of the key issues for regional investments in the future. I saw some of the parties have been like I know in the past, they just put out these regional plans. You're going to see when we assess those to see how very little has been done in the regions across the country. I noticed, let me just say this by the way, that's why I left it for the end, because the last thing I want to do is to talk much about these issues. But I made it clear that people who distort our record, PPP, and there are a bunch of them. APNU does this, and we expect that. But some of the smaller parties, especially one, has been distorting the record of the PPP. So I saw an ad from one of the candidates saying that I'd call him a hustler. And let me say, I don't recall specifically saying that. But if I did, I stand by it. And a hustler he tried to define this as, all Guyanese are hustlers. No, we're not all thieves. We're not all thieves. And, I can understand a man hustling to make a living and stuff like that. But in the context that I may have or may not have called him a hustler. I had specific issues that I had in mind. The stock feed shares, the under declaration, but running into billions of dollars taken from the treasury. And I can go on a long list. I just don't want to do that at this point in time. But if you distort what I say, and you distort a party's record, we're not doing like the past. When APNU started, that 400 persons got killed under the PVP, we ignored it because we thought that, well, people will see that when they look at the list, they would see, it's victims, it's the policemen who were killed, it's Indo-Guyanese, it's people who died from heart attack. We did not address it early enough. We're making one commitment now, that we're not going to allow anyone to distort. They can analyze our policies, and it's fair game. And we have a duty to defend our policies. We have a duty. If we can't defend it, we'll take the blame for it, because we're not perfect. But the thing is that not to distort like some of them are doing. And so that hustler thing is, I just wanted to say to people that. Thank you.